Tyler, what a pleasure to have you on the show today. I want to start with this very simple question. You've been in security for forever. Keep me honest on that
Yeah.
one. What got you passionate about security at the beginning of your road?
Oh wow, that's a great question. So I was lucky. I got into security when nobody was in security. So I got into security in the late '90s, and at that time, the only way to get into security was really government or military. And I just happened to find a company that had an opening for a security position. I had some IT background, but the reason why I became so passionate about it was honestly, even back then in the late '90s, it changed daily. You can't go a day without something new popping up, without a new attack or new vulnerability or something exciting happening in the world of security. And so that constant change, and it keeps you on your toes. It 100% does. But I think that's what I love about it is it keeps you going. You can't really find too many other places where you have this much of a dynamic atmosphere.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, if you're the kind of person that wants to deal with incredibly difficult challenges where the landscape is just so
Right.
dynamic, I mean, security. The other thing I love about security is like, unfortunately, is this is the cynical aspect of it. The industry is never going to go away. We're always going
Yeah.
to have, hackers and organized crime. We're always going to have healthcare, right? People are always going to get sick. So
Yep.
it's one of those really cool and stable industries when you think about your career. What I loved about your background is you started hardcore technical by reverse engineering
Yep.
threats. Look, we got to keep this high level for our audience, not getting super technical. And that's easy for me to do because I'm a software engineer. I started with the intelligence community myself. So let's keep it, simple and high level. But
Okay.
tell us what that means. What is reverse engineering threats? What does that look like? Tell us a story of an actual threat and people were like panicking. And what did you do?
All right. So I've got a great story for this, but reverse engineering with malware, and that's what I focused on, about computer viruses, is really, taking the program, the executable that gets run on a computer, and then basically picking apart the bytes of the program down to the lowest level to figure out what it does. If you kind of think about it, when you write a program, you write the source code. You write the program in a language that's readable to somebody proficient in that language. It then gets compiled into what's called machine code. So basically, the program that you execute on your computer. So, for example, if you were to like open up Notepad, the Notepad program in something like Word, it's going to be just a bunch of gobbledygook. It's not readable. Reverse engineering essentially takes that uh, executable and you basically decipher it. It's a big puzzle, and that's another thing that I love about malware analysis and forensics is it's just a big puzzle that I'm peeling back the layers to figure out what it does, and that's what I did very early on in my career. I really got into doing reverse engineering and malware analysis to see how these viruses worked, to see how this malware worked and these attacker tools worked, and that was really very eye opening. You asked about a story. I've got a really great story about this. I'm allowed to talk about this because others did as well. But one of my first incident response positions, I was kind of like the lead reverse engineer, and we had a attacker who was constantly getting into our environment. The what made this attacker so difficult is that they had all custom code. They didn't like download the malware or their backdoors from somewhere else. That everything was custom written. And so one of my jobs was to go in and basically figure out what this did, and more importantly, how could we find it on our network? One of the things that I found was the attacker actually made a mistake in their encryption. And I won't get down into all the details of it, but essentially, they made a mistake such that whenever they sent out network traffic, if we could find that network traffic, we could decrypt it just due to the mistakes that they made. And so we actually wrote a program that would decrypt their communications on the fly. So at the place that I worked, we had visibility into our entire network. As a global organization, we could see pretty much almost every network session on or in the environment, and we had figured out ways to detect the bad guys. Well, what we did is we got an alert one night and this was probably like 11 o'clock at night, because that's when alerts come in, right? They're never going to come in, noon on Monday. They're always at like 2 a.m. on Saturday. But we had this alert come in that one of these backdoors was on our was it. So my team and I jumped on. We're kind of dealing with this. But what we did was we set up the decoding program so that we could watch what the attacker was doing, and we would see the attacker. We could actually see them typing the keystrokes, because that's how their backdoor worked. We saw them move to one computer, and then we would shut that computer down. And then they moved to another computer, and then we would shut that computer down. And we could see as they tried to move to all of the different computers in the environment, we would immediately shut down the computer they were going to. And you could just tell by the rate of their keystrokes and the mistakes they started to make, they were starting to panic. And then after a while, we finally just got the okay, let's shut down the kind of like the main back door, and we did that. And this is one of the few cases where after that, we completely kicked them out. We never saw them again. So it's very possible they moved to a different backdoor or something else, but we never saw them again. So that was a huge win for us. And not to be toot my own horn or anything, but the ability for us to be able to decrypt that information on the fly from their backdoor, the reverse engineering, really is what led us to be able to do that.
And this is straight out of a movie. Thank you for sharing that story. What is you're engaging with these basically criminals, right?
Yeah.
Is there any kind of collaboration with law enforcement, or is it just every company to themselves trying to protect themselves? What do we look like from a community standpoint?
Yeah, it's always hard to say, because so from an overall community perspective, law enforcement, especially in the U.S., the FBI, DHS, they're part of InfraGard and some other organizations where they do share information. If you reach out to them, they may share some information to you. They release notifications and so on. Unfortunately, in my experience, though, when you have an incident, when an organization has an incident, the information between you and law enforcement is going to be a one-way street. You're going to be giving them information. They're going to be using it to build their case. In some instances, they will give you some information on things to look for, but more often than not, it's kind of a one-way street. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that I would advocate never talking to law enforcement, because I have seen instances where there is a ransomware attack and the FBI has a decryptor that the company can request access to. Sometimes they'll give you access to that. There have been public cases with that. So globally, I think organizations tend to be kind of low on the priority list, unfortunately. And again, this is my experience. I know everybody has their own experience with law enforcement and so on.
Let me propose a let's say a conflict to you, right?
Yeah.
And on the one hand, law enforcement is very one-sided. So what that means is that providing this information is not really to protect you. It's almost a public good that you're providing.
Right.
Which means that there's a cost and a time associated with the effort that you put into it. But on the other hand, right, like if everybody put this effort in, it would kind of all boats rise. My question is this, and now if you disagree with that, stop me, Tom. But if you agree with that, my question is there something missing in legislation, in the process, in the interaction that can make this process, maybe it's software, I don't know, something that can make this process so much better for people like yourself who are analyzing these attacks, networks and companies all over the world that can feed this information and work together as a community? What are your feelings kind of about the big picture?
So big picture, I don't think that there's anything missing in legislation. And the reason I say that is because law enforcement is really only one piece of the whole cybersecurity realm. Defenders do a pretty decent job of communicating with each other when bad things happen. There are lots of groups, special interest groups around different industries. So they're called ISACs. There's one for education, there's one for finance, there's one for public infrastructure, and lots more. they're really good at communicating with each other to talk about what each other's seeing, how you can defend against those attacks, how you can detect them. Even competitors, like major competitors, will work. Their security teams will work with each other because they know that they're all against the bad guys, whoever I'm using that term generically, but whoever the bad guys are. So on the legislation side, I don't think that there's anything missing there. It's really just being able to. It kind of comes down to, honestly, I think, knowing the right people to talk to and being a
Mm.
part of the right groups. And for a lot of people in security, that sounds a little odd because we go into computers because we don't want to talk to people. A lot of people. I mean, I was like this too. We go into dealing with computers or hacking or whatever it is because we don't want to interface with a lot of people. But you kind of have to when you're up against these threats because you may not be seeing the whole picture, or you definitely aren't seeing the whole picture. Somebody else is, and being able to communicate and even just bounce ideas off of people, or hey, what are you seeing? How are you dealing with this? Is so incredibly important that I don't know. I just can't stress that enough.
I love that. I mean, I myself was always frustrated. I started my career as a software engineer, and I was frustrated. You're interviewing me and talking to me, and I'm supposed to sell myself, and but what I do is work on a computer. There's just such a disconnect between the
Yeah.
way that I'm evaluated towards what I actually do in life, and a similar way to the difference between hackers and then working in the community. So that I think that's a fair point. I think that a lot of us learn how to become more and more and more social as we grow up,
Yeah.
which is a wonderful thing. And I think from many ways we're forced into it. But it also has its own surprises and delights. There's another question I have. There's a lot of security tools and techniques out there.
Yes.
Amazon has, over the last 5 years introduced a lot of things from inspector to auditing automatically, all this stuff. What do we have good enough solutions? Are there tools that everybody should be using, or is it still the Wild West?
I'm going to say a little bit of both. So there are definitely a lot of tools that everybody should be using, and you kind of taking that a little generically. When I started my career in security, antivirus was the thing that everybody said you had to have on your systems. We've kind of moved off of that to EDR and XDR. Kind of a bit more. I know some people hate this term, but like antivirus on steroids.
Right, and explain the difference between EDR, XDR, and an antivirus to kind of bring
Sure.
everyone in the audience, not just the geeks like us, with this journey.
Sure. So, traditional antivirus would basically scan your computer, watch your computer, and it would do that based off of signatures. So, the antivirus company would find a virus, they would figure out some characteristics about it to detect it, and that is what they would use to find the computer viruses on all the systems. The issue with that was if you didn't have the updated signatures, you're not going to detect the latest stuff. And it got to a point where I think the recommendation was like updating your signatures every 2 hours or even more. So there was a lot. It also didn't take into account what was happening on your system. So as always, attackers advance their techniques, they advance their knowledge, and so they realized that if we are using the same like tools and static tools and malware, that it's going to be easy to detect. But if we change that up, then it's going to be harder for us to be detected. The antivirus companies won't be able to do that. And so they started to do that, but their behavior stayed the same. And so that's where an EDR came into play. EDR stands for endpoint detection and response. Basically, think of it as like antivirus, but it's also looking at what's happening on your system. Most EDR has some type of signatures within it, but it's also looking at what is this program doing? Is it writing to a place on the computer to auto start, which is a little suspicious? Is it trying to access files it shouldn't be? Is it scanning the network and so on? And so all of these different behaviors can be kind of correlated together to get a profile and determine if something malicious is happening on the computer. Now you move forward a couple years, and then you get XDR, which is a little bit of a marketing term. In my opinion, there's not too much different between EDR and XDR. I'll be honest with you, I'm not really sure what the X stands for because I've heard so many different things. But it basically is the next step in endpoint visibility and detection, where it's not just looking at the behavior. It could be looking at across your entire environment to see if that makes sense. It probably adds in things like user behavior analytics. So in other words, looking to see, does this user normally log in at this time? Do they normally, log in from where they logged in from? Do they normally access this file? Is this person in HR? And if so, why are they accessing accounting's finance files? Things like that. I'm sure it's also including in machine learning, AI, things like that. So it's just kind of like the next evolution.
And there's something beautiful about it. If you think about your mobile phone, you install an app. I think a lot of people kind of ignore this, but you see the permissions that the
Oh
app is
yeah.
asking for. And EDR XDR is, to kind of make a very simple analogy. If your app is asking for a whole bunch of permissions that it does not need, including, listening to your microphone and your video, and it's a calculator app, like that's an issue, right? It's going
Yeah.
beyond the scope and bounds of what it's supposed to do. So really, that's kind of a simple way to understand. Everything has a certain scope and bound, and if it's trying to update your registry, like why is it even trying to do that?
Right. Exactly.
How is AI changing the industry, if at all? Like, did something after ChatGPT came out? Are we suddenly more concerned, less concerned, or did it not change anything?
No, it's definitely more concerning. AI, I would even say in the last 2 years, has significantly changed the security space. If you look at it from the attacker's perspective, even starting at the beginning, think of it with like phishing messages. We're all used to the phishing messages that come in with the misspellings and bad grammar and things like that. Attackers are now using AI to basically craft legitimate looking
Yeah.
messages that are really hard to distinguish. It's even going farther than that, where even today I heard of a attack where an attacker sent a email to a victim, supposedly from their CEO, saying, "Hey, I need you to wire transfer this money to this new client. Oh, here's a Teams meeting. Jump on this Teams meeting with me to talk about this." And the person did, and the attacker had used generative AI to basically create a avatar of the CEO, sounded like the CEO, looked like the CEO, and was talking to the person in real time. Now, fortunately, these aren't perfect yet. And so the person was able to figure out something's not right here. And so they hung up the call, called the CEO, and obviously the CEO had no idea what they were talking about. But just the use of AI has significantly made security defense more difficult. Now, on the plus side, I think defenders, while there was, I think, a little bit of a slow adoption in the beginning, more and more defenders are starting to use AI to their advantage. I'm seeing it pop up in security tools a lot more, where it's able to correlate things faster. It gives more context around alerts, and able to basically, help defenders, find the bad stuff or detect the bad stuff before it gets too far or even into their environment at all.
I gotta be humble and say that, maybe 5 years ago, if I saw any kind of phishing attack, I was like, okay, that's a phishing attack. I can teach my teams how to avoid this, right? Look
Right.
at the HTTPS, look at where the email's coming from, look at this, that, and another. Uh, and I felt okay. Today, I am scared. I look at stuff
Yeah.
and I'm asking myself, is this real? Is this real? And I don't have a certain clear answer. It's even the professionals are now getting to the level that this stuff is scary.
Oh yeah,
Um,
and it's only going to get better from here. I mean, look
yes,
at how far it's improved in the last year or two. Imagine what it's going to be like in 5 years. I mean, I agree. It's only going to get scarier and scarier from here.
yeah, no, it's absolutely horrifying. I've gotten these texts. Oh, send money, buy a gift card, buy this and that, and I really the only way for me to figure this out is to just call that person with the number that I know is
Yeah.
verified and be like, "Is this you? Like, did you send me this?" It's the only way I figured out to do this. And of course, the thing that's often a giveaway is patterns. If
Right.
somebody is doing something which is a pattern which is odd or new or not something that this person would traditionally do, that's a dead giveaway. But I think us as the community, we just need to be aware of that these patterns are important. If anything is odd, you should double check.
Yeah, absolutely. And this doesn't even just, I would say this doesn't even extend or is limited to organizations. This goes to, your personal life as well. I don't know how many times I get, somebody messaging me about, hey, I got this email from that looks like it's from Amazon or, something similar. That's going to be AI in the background too. The attackers using that. So I mean, you're right. If it's setting off those feelings that something's not quite right here, go with your gut. That's really the best thing to do. The one thing that I'll say though, from what you said, be very careful when you're calling that number. Make sure it's not the number in like the email.
Yes.
I have worked several incidents where an attacker kind of intercepts those email messages and changes the phone number in there to be their own phone number. So go with what's saved in your phone or anything like that. That's really the way to go.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful point. I want to change the topic a little bit. What is your number one concern today when it comes to security? Is it, vulnerabilities? Is it, phishing attacks? What do you think is the thing that is most scary nowadays?
Ooh. If I look at it in terms of what's scary to me in that it has the most impact or it has the most impact that I've seen, I'm probably going to have to choose phishing. And the reason I say that is because a phishing attack can lead to so many different things. One of the most common types of incidents that myself and my team will work are called business email compromises. It's where an attacker breaks into an email account, is able to then use the information within that account, start messaging, their clients, sending fake invoices, things like that, and it can lead to a lot of money lost. It always starts with a phishing attack, and there are so many things that can happen from there. I've seen ransomware attacks start from a phishing attack. I've seen those business email compromises. I've seen server compromises. I've seen data breaches. I've seen so many things start with a phishing attack. Phishing has been around for a long time. And like we just talked about, it's only getting better. People are falling for it more. And so to me, that's the scariest thing right now. And I know a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, they do a lot to try to prevent that or detect it. Unfortunately, it still gets through. It's one of those things where I don't know if we're ever going to be 100% protected against it. And so it always comes back to have a way for the people who receive a phish and potentially fall for it, have a way that they can notify somebody about that without suffering negative consequences. That's another one of those things where I try to preach that if somebody fell victim to an attack, don't punish them for that. It's everybody makes mistakes, and so you just need to move on and be thankful that they told you about it so you can limit the damage.
Absolutely. Are there simple things or simple technologies when it comes to security that people are just not using? They should, and it just makes them so much secure. And specifically, I want to lean into, the stuff that maybe people should own or should use or should kind of basic stuff for the people themselves, not organizations and security teams.
Okay, sure. So for people themselves, one of the things that I use all the time that I'm surprised that more people don't use is like one-time use credit cards. And so they're, everybody shops online, right? Everybody's, going to a website, you all, if anybody's like me, you find like that one website that has a really good deal that on whatever you're trying to get, and you're not going to buy it from Amazon because Amazon is more expensive or whatever, and so you want to buy it from that place or you want to support that website, but you don't know if you can trust it. There are websites dedicated to basically allowing you to, or legitimate websites and services allowing you to create one-time use credit cards or limited use credit cards. Most credit card companies now have this as well, where you can generate that.
Yes.
That's one of the most effective things, I think, to prevent somebody from suffering credit card fraud or financial fraud online by using those. I've even had it where a local pizza place that we ordered from all the time. I would never use my debit card when I was ordering online, or even my credit card. I would generate a one-time use credit card in order to just order pizza. Again, this is a local place down the road from me. All of a sudden, about 6 months ago, on one of those one-time use credit cards, I started getting alerts that somebody was trying to charge funds to it. Now they couldn't because technically it didn't exist anymore. But if I hadn't used that and used my debit card or my credit card, I would have had who knows how many hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraud. So something like that is really easy to help protect yourself.
That's such a wonderful comment. I actually did not hear this before, so this is a first for me. I have a genuinely curiosity. The iPhones and Google Pays of the world,
Mm-hmm.
are they putting a technology there where when you pay it's really a one-time use credit card number, or is that just giving you their credit card number to the best of your knowledge? Because it seems like that's an obvious thing that it should do.
Yeah. You know what? I honestly don't know. I use Google Pay every once in a while. I'm a Google user. I don't know, honestly. I'm
That
gonna
would be
have to look
such
into that.
that would be
You're right.
such
It
a
makes
good
sense.
ad, right, for Google and Apple to be like, hey, using your phone is more secure than your actual credit card. They should, if they haven't done that, they should. I'm going to look into this too. So, okay, so I want to ask you about this. Should
Okay.
everybody have something like this, or and explain what it is and why it's important and how it helps? But physical tokens, do they have a place in our world?
They absolutely do. So physical tokens, when you talk about like things like YubiKeys or things like that, if I had to make a prediction over the next 10 years, I think we are going to be. I think we're moving to being a passwordless society. Passwords are gonna be phased out at some point. I think within the next decade. And the reason that is because passwords you can guess, you can crack passwords, you can leak them. It happens all the time. With the physical tokens, it's actually a more secure way to authenticate to services, to websites, to your computer, and so on, without having to know a password. I couldn't quite see the one you have. Is it one
It's
that
the
has like the
Titan, the Google.
biometrics? Okay.
Yeah, it's not biometrics, but you do have to physically push it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's touch.
It kind of comes back to that's what the original like multi-factor, two-factor authentication was. It's something plus something that you have, and plus the I'll admit I don't understand the protocols that happen underneath as well as I probably should. But I do know that with some of the physical tokens that you can buy, like again, like YubiKeys, and I just mentioned that one because that's the one that I know the most. That the method that information is transferred is excuse me, is actually done more securely. In
Yeah.
fact, jumping back to business email compromises, one of the things that the attackers do is they set up a site so that they can intercept your password. And then even if you have multi-factor authentication, like you get that text on your phone with the however many number of PIN that you then have to type in, they can't intercept that, but they can intercept basically the authorization that comes back, and then that's what allows them into the system. With things like certain physical tokens, they can't do that. So it's actually an even more secure protocol. So I would say they're not used as much as they should be, but they're definitely going to be coming. I think more in the future.
Yeah, there's so much. So here's the thing, right? If you're doing more than 50% of the general population, you're already much safer,
Oh
because
yeah.
organized crime and all these organizations that are coming after us, they're looking for the path of least resistance. So if you just do a little bit more, right, it's the bear chasing the both of us. I just need to run faster than you. The bear eats you, I'm safe. And so I always say, definitely turn on your it's not the most secure in the world, but it's better than not having it, right? Turn on your
Right.
SMS authentication. I hate the apps, but I use them because sometimes you have to. The
Yep.
app authentication, physical tokens, right? It's super valuable. and even just a password password manager that will generate random passwords for every different account. Like, all these things put you a little bit above everybody else. So a little bit of a public service announcement over there. I want to change the topic with your permission, Tyler. When you look at startups versus, startups, let's say, up to 10 people, then you look at the up to 200 people, 10 to 200 people, and then you look at the massive, Siemenses and Googles of the world. Is the security approach different, or are startups are they basically screwed because they don't have the money to secure themselves properly? Like, how do we think about this as the company grows?
Yeah, so there is definitely a difference, and I think it really comes down to how much money they have available, their budget or their funds to get security. Um, what I've seen is startups, and I'll even kind of lump small businesses in there as well. Even established small businesses, they just don't have the funds to go out and buy like all the security software that an organization, a larger organization, can. They may not be able to go out and buy the EDR to put on their systems. They may not be able to go out and get like an incident response retainer or even afford cyber insurance or anything like that. And so the approaches, are definitely different. One of I guess when I look at it with startups and small businesses, really the most effective thing, or some of the most effective things that I've seen them do is, first off, make sure that things are secure by default. Don't share passwords. Have passwords. Unfortunately, I've talked to some organizations where they just all the computers just boot up and everybody can access everybody else's files. Obviously that becomes an issue if an attacker gets in. They could just access whatever they want. I would also recommend that really any business, and to be fair, I see large businesses not doing this too when they should, is create an incident response policy. All that has to be is a document that says who you are going to call when something bad happens. If you have cyber insurance, it should be that information. If you have an IT provider, it's going to be them. If you are lucky enough and have like an IR retainer or something similar to that, it can be them. But the purpose of that document is, and print it off too. Don't just keep it on your computer. Print it off, put it in a file somewhere, put it in a safe somewhere. But the advantage of having that document is when something bad does happen, it becomes very chaotic. It becomes crazy. People panic. But having that document at least is going to give you the first steps that you need to do in order to start you on the road to recovery. I'm not sure if that completely answered your question, but
I'll give you a few more tips and tricks from my side. We talk about pen testing, penetration testing, which is really hiring a hacker to come and, try and hack into your network. Right. My biggest pet peeve with pen testing is that you do it maybe once a year, because that's kind of what the standards require you to do. And then, except for that, you have all your scanning tools. So my suggestion, and this totally flies with auditors, like this is a legitimate strategy. Instead of spending $20,000 to $50,000 on a pen test, go and pay a security expert, and you can even change your expert once every 3 months, to do a white box audit of your infrastructure and to look what you're doing, how you're working, work closely with your engineering team to basically audit your stuff. Now, what this does is pretty amazing. One is, your engineering team that's writing the code, they don't know too much about security. That's not their specialty. So that's teaching them a lot. The auditor is finding all these problems and is guiding the engineering team how to fix it. And auditors will genuinely accept that process as a replacement for pen testing. And in fact, I don't know if you would agree with me. Feel free to disagree. I would say it's a stronger process, because you have somebody who would normally do pen testing, but instead of just doing a pen testing one point in time, they're going and checking that you're actually set up correctly in a white box manner. And sorry for this jargon. White box means that they actually open your infrastructure. They're looking at all your code, all of your setups on Amazon, all your scripts, and they're actually reviewing them as opposed to like guessing what your weakness might be. So I think that's such a cheap hack to get good security if you just don't have the money for these more aggressives. And then the other thing I would say, a lot of the Amazon, and I'm sure Azure has, similars, is that you can turn on all these security scans, and it's actually based on the size of your network and how much communication you have and all that. So it can cost you as low as 10, 20, $100 a month, just based on the fact that you're so small. So I think there's a lot of hacks out there, quote unquote, process hacks that startups should be aware of to be secure, even though they don't have the money to really have these red teams and this incredible security infrastructure. So definitely something that I'm passionate about.
No, I 100% agree with you on that. There is definitely a place for doing pen testing and red teaming and all the offensive services out there, but especially for newer companies, or if you've never done one before, going the route that you said, having that white box, essentially like a configuration assessment done,
Yes.
you're going to get more for your money there. Because I mean, if you look at it, when you do a pen test, they're really, either they're going to be scanning your network for vulnerabilities, which the configuration analysis is probably going to find anyways, or they're just going through like one or two routes to break into your environment. By doing the configuration analysis, you're going to kind of like turn off all those holes at once. They're going to
Yes.
find all those things, especially when you're talking about, you mentioned Azure and AWS. I love cloud services.
Yes.
They're not really secure by default. So a lot of
Yes.
people just really don't know what they should and should not, what they should turn off, what they should turn on, what they can, and so on. And having that configuration assessment done will go a long way to help them with that. I'll even throw in too that if a company is like very concerned about a specific type of attack, I'm going to pick on ransomware. If they're really concerned that, we're afraid that if we get hit by ransomware, we're going to be kind of completely taken out, you can even take that white box assessment and have whoever's doing it think of it from a ransomware side, or that specific type of attack, and look at it from that perspective. So in a white box assessment, maybe they're not looking at your backups too deeply, but in a ransomware version of that, they're probably going to look at your backups and see, do you even have backups? Are they stored off-site? Are they encrypted? Do you have immutable backups? The whole laundry list of things that can be done to help prevent that type of attack. And again, it's not a pen test that's doing it. It's somebody just looking at your stuff and telling you, all right, go flip these switches and you're going to be 1,000 times more secure.
Oh my God, that is, you touched such a nerve for me, this topic of backups. Like, and you know what? I have seen in systems that I've managed, the difference between having a backup and testing your backup. So incredibly important. The ability to actually restore and recover your system and to know that you haven't lost information. It is not trivial. It is not simple. It's got a lot better nowadays because, back in the day, SQL databases, it was a pain in the ass. There's a lot better technology, but still, please, if people have to take one thing away from this interview, is please test your backups. Here's the thing. One of my big, and you mentioned this, but it was such an important point that I want to kind of drill into and make sure that the audience is with us. A pen tester could do something as simple as looking at the recent patches that have come out yesterday, right? And say, okay, this recent patch that come out yesterday, there's no way in hell that you probably patched your systems. So I'm just going to use the hack that I know is associated with this very recent patch. Now, what's the problem with that? If I'm hacking you, attacking you in that way, and you go and fix that, well, I really haven't fixed anything in your system. Really, what I need to be talking about is the fact that you have these automatic patches and you have the right security information incidents coming into your system, and that there's a process there to remediate that across the board. So, passing a pen test, it could be that you just got lucky or unlucky. Thinking about this from a systematic process perspective is so, so, so important. So that's another thing that, personal pet peeve of mine. Okay. So for the intermediate, right? I have a budget, right? I have, let's say, 50 to 200 people. Do I need to have a security team with 5 people? What does the correct process look like if I'm like in the, let's say 10 to 20, $50 million in revenue?
I hate to give like the typical consultant answer of it depends, but it really does. So let's ignore any potential factors like you have like a regulatory requirement to have a security team, or you have client contracts that require you to. It really comes
But
down
hold on,
to
that's incredibly important, because I think that's where it starts, right? If you're a
yeah.
healthcare company, or if
Oh
you're a
yeah.
banking company, or if you're like putting damn videos on YouTube for a living, like that is where you start. Like, how much are you at risk? So
Right.
I think that's actually a really great point where you started from. Who are you, right?
Right. Yeah. It's looking at right, like just like you said, who are you? What type of systems do you have? What data do you have? How do you work with customers and so on? And do you need like an internal security team? Maybe not, but you should at least have somebody that you are working with who has that security mindset. If the organization isn't big enough to have like their own CISO, there are fractional CISO services that you can hire
Yes.
out where it's cheaper than hiring a person to be your chief information security officer. And you have that constant expertise. I think what it comes down to is when the organization starts to feel overwhelmed with the potential security issues out there, that's when they need to start bringing in people. And this could come from multiple places in the organization. It could be from IT, because IT usually gets stuck doing security first. It could come from legal. It could come from, if you have like a risk management group or a privacy group, or anything like that. That's where it's going to come out of. But yeah, I don't have like a checklist of you need to meet X, Y, and Z before you have your own security team. But most organizations, I think, once they hit, I think you said that 5 million plus, probably need to have at least somebody on their team who is, I'm not going to say an expert in security, but has a working knowledge of security. They don't necessarily need to be a full-time person, but maybe they should be. Again, it's going to depend on how many employees you have, what your data is, and so on.
Yeah. I think one of the insights I came to is that especially if you're one of these small organizations, that you don't have to be perfect. You just need to be better every day, or
Right.
every week, or every
Yeah.
month. So this idea of incremental improvement, what that means is that over time, you're going to be 100-fold better than somebody that's just not thinking about it.
Right.
So whatever the budget that you could associate with this, create a process, have an activity that happens weekly, monthly, whatever, and just make sure that you're making these small steps. And don't be frustrated if you run one of these scans and you see that you have 1,000 items. It's okay. Prioritize them. Take only the high critical items. Take, out of the end up with, let's say, 50 or 30 items. Just say, okay, I'm going to do one of these once a week, right? And just
Right.
churn through them. It's completely okay. You'll still be much better than not having that process.
Yeah, and even with that, over time, you're going to start realizing where your big gaps are, and stuff that you just don't know how to handle, or your organization doesn't know how to handle. And that's when you can start reaching out to companies that can help you with that. There are very few organizations, even the huge like Fortune 50 whatever organizations. There are very few of them that can do everything around security themselves. In fact, I don't know any company that has that. Everybody reaches out to security consulting or security experts, and just know who you can contact. I mean, there are so many security groups
Yeah.
around, whether that's InfraGard or ISSA, or even a lot of local groups that spin up. Go to one of those meetings, meet some of the security people there, and now you have people that you can kind of bounce things off of. Just having those contacts. It always goes back to the people just having those contacts is going to go a long way when you kind of do need that help.
Yeah, and I'll name drop in version 6, which is the company that you recently
Yes.
joined. You can get a fractional a security officer from them and from many other places. Um, so it's something that every CTO, CEO should be thinking about. When you think about the future of security,
Hmm.
what do you think are going to be the big things in, let's say, the next 10 years?
Definitely AI, like we talked about. I think AI is going to just overwhelm everybody. I mean, overwhelm is probably the wrong word, but it's going to be more in the forefront of security, over the next 10 years for sure. Honestly, too, I think that there are things that we haven't even thought of that 10 years from now are going to be commonplace for us. Um, Computing is going to advance, tremendously over the next 10 years. We're going to have more technology that we need to worry about. Look back like 10 years ago, we didn't think I don't think most people thought AI would be as commonplace as it is now, or
No.
even like cell phones. The usage of cell phones and mobile devices over the last 10 years has grown exponentially. Who knows what's going to come out tomorrow that everybody is going to want and start using on a constant
Yeah.
basis. There's a lot of unknowns. I think also, and as weird as this is going to sound, there's all these unknowns, but there's also all of this legacy technology
Yeah.
that we're going to have to figure out how to deal with over the next 10 years. I'm old enough to remember Y2K. I was part of IT when Y2K happened. I don't think many people know this. There's another one coming up in 2038.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's
that
the Linux one, right?
Right, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, not only that, when you look at organizations that are in healthcare and manufacturing, even like public works that have these 10, 20-year-old computers that are extremely vulnerable and old, we're going to have to figure out what to do with them. That's a problem now. It's just going to, I think, get even worse over the next 10
Yeah.
years.
My brother was a flight controller, and they were like, nobody can update the system, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's impossible to update this, and yet it works, but it's arcane.
Yeah.
And they put millions and millions and millions of dollars into writing a new system because, like, look, we can't touch this. We need a new system. It completely failed. They threw it out within the first week. There were almost accidents that happened when they introduced the system. So this is a real problem, right? You
Oh
have
yeah.
all this knowledge that is being poured into these infrastructural systems that nobody knows, the languages that some of these systems were even written in. And what we definitely don't know, even if you train on the languages, we definitely don't understand the business logic and why they're doing
Right.
what they're doing and why it's so important. So this is a real problem. This is a significant problem.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from my experience, I'm an incident response. I get called into, manufacturing environments, healthcare environments, and so on. In the last 2 or 3 years, I've worked on Windows 2000 systems. I've worked on Windows XP systems. I've worked on systems that were running MS DOS still. So yeah, they're still out there.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. We just don't, unless you're exposed to this, you just do
Yeah.
not expect that is the picture in the world. And banking is suffering from this a lot as
Oh
well.
yeah.
It's a huge issue. And languages like I mean COBOL, like who even knows that that's a thing? Like who even you can see I've got the white hair, right? I programmed in assembly and C++ and
Yeah.
Pascal is how I learned. So
Same.
I date myself. But this is a real problem. Taylor, what an absolute joy. I want to ask a question. This has been, we're out of time. I didn't even notice how time flies, but let me ask you one last question, okay?
Sure.
Um, if you had to, and this is a personal question, if you had to go back and give advice to 20-year-old Taylor, what would that advice be?
Don't stop learning. And not that I have, but when you get busy, things you tend to slow down. Um, but there have definitely been times in my life where I've had the opportunity to learn something new, and I haven't. And just like what you said before, with the organizations, do one small thing a week. learn one small thing a week. Over time, that's going to build up. And there are some people I know who constantly do that, and they are in a much better place than they are now. I would also probably say don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
I did that way too late in my career, because again, I got into computers because I didn't want to deal with people. I hated talking in front of groups and things like that. And once I finally kind of made myself do that, my career blossomed. I met so many new people. I have a lot of friends, specifically because of that. And so, don't be afraid to do that.
Tyler, thank you so much. What an absolute joy. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you.